myself very quickly, and Hisham, Fadi already did most of that, which is fantastic. So again, my name is Roy Schilling. I'm an Agile coach and trainer. I was introduced to Carlyle Group a little over a year ago now, and Hisham and I have been working together to help their transformation. So what I'd like to point out is at the bottom of the screen here, there is a link that if you could load that application or that link, that would be great. I'll put it in the chat window. We have a couple of interactive polls through the session. You don't need to download any applications. You can just do it through the browser, and it's completely anonymous. So we're not collecting any information, just to make it help us make it a little more interactive. So let's jump in. We only have about an hour. I want to make sure that we get to the good stuff. I'd like to turn it over to Hisham. And Hisham, why don't you introduce who the Carlyle Group is?
Sure. First of all, Fadi, thanks for having us tonight. We're happy to be here. And so just, again, a bit more context. I've been with the Carlyle Group for now 12 years. I've done a lot of different things. We're actually going to walk through it in a second. But a little bit about the Carlyle Group. So it's a private equity firm. We're actually headquartered here in DC on Pennsylvania Avenue. We manage around $200 billion in assets under management across these 4 primary business segments that you see here. What I particularly do, I work within our information technology department. That's internal to the Carlyle Group. So think of my clients as kind of the internal folks are all my clients. Yeah. So the journey. So let me kind of walk you through our journey, and then we'll go from there. So I actually started with the firm with Carlyle in 2008. I was hired as a project manager, again, within IT, specifically managing kind of HR projects. When I started with the Carlyle Group, projects were mostly done in IT in a black box, right? There was no communication or collaboration between the business and IT. What happened in the business was very much kind of a black box, and it got thrown over the fence. And again, there was no communication or visibility, and there was obviously a lack of trust between the two groups. This continued through 2009, 2010. In terms of methodology, it was kind of all over the place. A little methodology, I would say, somewhat waterfall with some agile techniques, like agile stand-ups primarily. But again, somewhat haphazard. I was, I think, the first or second project manager that was hired for Carlyle. So again, part of my job was also bring the structure in place, but that took some time. In 2011, we had a new CIO, Chief Information Officer, who started within the IT group, who basically decided to go all in from an agile standpoint. So said, hey, we're going to be doing, all of our projects are now going to be agile. And agile IT projects are successful three times more than non-agile projects. And so that's the mantra that we had. We brought in a bunch of agile coaches. We took our project managers and we turned them into Scrum masters, and we were doing agile. And so just like that, we started jump-starting different project teams, explaining what the Agile Manifesto was and how to do agile, and we basically went about doing agile. And so obviously, as you can imagine, this helped incrementally improve the engagement between the business and IT, but this was just doing agile, right? And so this was, again, it was the right step in the right direction. But again, unfortunately, what happened in 2014 is we had changes within our technology team. And because this agile methodology was kind of rolled out at a very much of a IT-centric manner, and in a very much of a practical kind of let's do agile mindset, all the changes on any of the momentum that we had basically went out the door. And so we comfortably kind of went back into our comfortable ways of working, right? And so there was again, your typical kind of backslide into the old habits of working. We had a hybrid mode emerge where people started doing Agile and Waterfall. And shortly thereafter, we had another chief information officer who joined, and a PMO formed as well. And so we transitioned very quickly from doing Agile to now doing hybrid and having a PMO. Now, in 2019, there was a recognition, and this is actually when I met Roy, and I brought in Roy specifically to help kind of strengthen the discipline around how we were doing Agile. I felt like we were taking a step back. We weren't doing the things that we were doing back in 2011. And so again, I just thought we needed to kind of double down on kind of discipline and practices and what have you. Once we did that exercise, there was an immediate kind of aha moment that I had, along with others, that, man, we were doing this all backwards, right? So we weren't really reaping the benefits of Agile because we weren't necessarily kind of being Agile, right? So we weren't really doing any of the principles or the cultural fundamentals that we needed to have in place to successfully reap the benefits. And so what we immediately did is we actually had a meeting with our CEO and our CFO or COO, and we said, hey, listen, in order for us to really reap the benefits here, we need a fundamental kind of cultural and organizational kind of change to really become Agile. And so luckily for us, from a timing standpoint, it worked out really well because Carlyle was also going through a broader transformation. And so we basically took that as an opportunity to kind of say, hey, well, let's actually go about and do an Agile transformation. And let's extend this not only to IT, but let's start extending this kind of beyond IT as well. So it was an opportunity for us to kind of really be radical in terms of how we wanted to kind of do things and really shift the organization and the culture upside down. And so we'll walk through that obviously in the next couple of slides, but long story short, in early 2020, January of this year, we officially launched our Agile transformation. I gotta say, in the past 6, 7, 8 months, we've made tremendous strides. We've learned a lot. We continue learning every single day, but it's been a fantastic experience.
Awesome. All right, so I'd like to talk a little bit about the practices versus culture, as Hisham kind of touched on the doing Agile versus being Agile, and I like to phrase it that most organizations go through 3 levels or 3 stages of Agile. And the first is what I call Scrum adoption. Basically a whole bunch of teams going off and they start doing Agile. Usually they try to find standards, everyone doing the same thing. They typically just go off and they start doing Scrum. And that's the very base level of doing Agile. That's where, unfortunately, a lot of organizations tend to stop. They go off, they maybe get some level of benefit, but they're not really an Agile organization yet. The next level of Agile, to me, is kind of like Agile adoption. This is where we're starting to get more cultural changes. We're starting to understand the principles a little bit more. We're getting more alignment. We're getting strategic alignment. We're focusing more on value. Still not 100% there yet, but we're making some progress. And the final level is where we get to Agile transformation, true transformation, where we're transforming the culture. We're focusing more on behaviors and the psychology, the organizational culture, and not just following the rituals of doing Agile. And this is what what Carlyle has gone through. And I want you to keep in mind that Carlyle is a private equity firm, and being a private equity firm, being a fairly, a relatively older organization, very hierarchical, very structured kind of organization. For them to have gone through this cultural transformation is dramatic. I'm very, very proud of the work that they've done there. They've taken a fairly traditional organization and understood that if they really want to reap the benefits of Agile, they have to focus on the cultural aspects. So now the organization's in a place where we're focusing more on concepts of experimentation and continuous improvement, more transparency, a lot more openness. Now, I'm not saying that they're perfect yet. Of course, they're not. It's going to take many, many years to get to a level where they've gone beyond just some of the basic cultural aspects. But they're making dramatic strides toward more of an Agile culture organization rather than just following the practices. All right, I'd like to very quickly let's do a quick little poll here. So I'm going to pause the time here. So if you can get, open up that link, and it's in the chat window. What I'd like to see from you here is what changes you would like to see in your organization. I'll give us about a 2-minute timer here. It's always interesting to get the results of these, some of the things that people would love to see in their organizations. Awesome. All right, I think we're pretty close. Just about there. Really even split. This is really interesting.
Very even, yeah.
Yeah, really even split over some interesting concepts here. I like this. All right, I'm going to pause our timer here, and let's take a look at this real quick. So pretty even split. So stable self-organizing teams is a big winner. Better business IT alignment, that we could always make use of that. Down to value over dates, and still shifting a little bit, which is awesome. Culture of experimentation, that's great. Outcome over output, and transparency and openness. So we're going to talk a little more about some of these concepts as we get a little bit deeper. So thanks very much for participating. I'm going to stop that. There we go. Okay, let's move on. And Hisham, would you like to take it from here? Come on, there we go.
And everyone, if you have questions, feel free to kind of ask as we go along. We want to make this interactive. Don't feel like you have to wait until the end of the session. So keep the questions coming. We'll be checking a chat window here. Let's make this informal. Let's make this interactive. So yeah, Agile refresher. That's when I invited Roy, right? So I need someone from outside to kind of come in, help provide a refresher course on Agile to both our product owners and some of our IT leadership teams. I think it was a 2-day training session split over 4 days. We basically trained, again, the bulk of the senior kind of group across the business and IT. What came out of those 2 sessions, like I mentioned earlier, was an aha moment. One, there was a lot of buzz in the hallway on, man, we're actually just scratching the surface from an Agile standpoint. There's so much more we can do. So there was a complete kind of recognition coming out of that. Again, I mentioned we were in the middle of a transformation. So there was an opportunity for myself and others to really get in there and say, hey, listen, let's start thinking about transforming, extending our Agile transformation. Let's go all in on Agile. And so what that meant is, where we were right now, we weren't structured appropriately, nor were we aligned properly, and nor were we kind of thinking about kind of the right things in terms of how we can kind of go about doing Agile. So we had to kind of rethink kind of the overall structure. We had to rethink our overall culture, and we had to move away from some of the outdated concepts like project and align back to kind of more product lines and focus areas, which we'll talk to about in a little bit. The first thing, though, is that we had that commitment in place. We had a meeting with our CFO, our Chief Operating Officer, along with our CIO, where we basically laid out to them, hey, listen, this is an opportunity for us to gain a lot of value, a lot of benefits if we were to kind of shift, again, back to Roy's slide, the principles and the values. The true leadership and the true kind of change happens at those levels. So if we shift our mindset in terms of how we operate, if we move away from projects to products, if we move away from funding projects to funding capacity, when we start kind of shifting some of that mindset, that's going to enable and unlock tremendous value down the line. So we got that buy-in relatively early, which was awesome for us, and huge.
Yep. And Hisham, just very quickly, I know we have a question in the chat about capacity-based funding. We're going to get to that in a couple of slides. So if you wouldn't mind holding that question, we will absolutely talk about what that means.
Great. Roy?
Okay. All right. Awesome. So then after we got that commitment to go through the transformation, obviously the first thing that we wanted to do is put together a pilot program. We wanted to be able to prove out that this was going to work properly, not to prove Agile necessarily, because that's been proven over and over and over again, more to prove that Agile can be done properly in this particular organization. So we stood up a pilot program on. It's actually a lot of risk. It was a very key, high level kind of a pilot program where there was a lot of risk. There were a lot of challenges. This was being run specifically by the CFO, who is a primary character, obviously, in the organization. Being the CFO, he would be. And so there was a lot of focus and intention on this particular pilot program. So lots of risk. But that's good too, because if you're not willing to take the risk, you get put your money where your mouth is. So we went on this program, did some training for them, got the team structured, and we obviously ran into some challenges. So we worked through those challenges and started seeing some really good successes happening. So Hisham, next one.
Yeah, I mean, good momentum obviously came out of that.
Yep.
Again, a lot of good success that was widely recognized by our C-level leadership, CFO specifically, just good momentum all around. In the meantime, in parallel to this, to kind of running this pilot program, we started kind of thinking about, all right, what do we need to do to kind of start restructuring our organization? So again, we were, like any traditional organization, we were aligned by platform, by IT platforms. We were doing projects. And so we wanted to, and we were predominantly doing a lot of back office related work, meaning, again, think kind of HR, finance, legal, what have you. What we weren't doing is kind of working on other areas kind of across Carlyle, across the business, like investor relations and fundraising and things of that nature. The duration of the pilot was what, 8 months, 6 to 8 months, I would say.
Yeah, thereabouts. Yeah.
And again, it wasn't let's do the pilot and let's wait. It was let's do the pilot, let's get some incremental wins, let's prove that this is working. In the meantime, let's start kind of restructuring our organization. So what we needed to do is kind of work with leadership and define what are the main focus areas and main product lines, right? We're not selling products per se internally at Carlyle, but we have focus areas that require kind of attention that we need to kind of realign towards. And so we shifted the organization align around those core business priorities, those focus areas that we were just either not investing in or under investing in the past. Now, the big thing as well that we were able to do is we actually, for the first time, actually activated our firm goals. So meaning we have firm goals, but this was really the first time that we actually aligned work to our firm goals. And then to the first time that we actually had each of the different focus areas come in and develop their own goals that align back to the firm goals. That now you have full traceability between the firm goals, your focus area goals, so you're able to kind of see that lineage. And so as we're achieving kind of success, we're able to kind of trace that all the way back up, and we're able to kind of see what's moving the needle for Carlyle and what's not. What should we continue working on? What should we stop?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And from there, we established the COE. So Hisham, did you want to talk about the COE?
Yeah, so again, I was part of PMO. And so what we basically did is, as part of the PMO, we weren't your traditional kind of bureaucratic PMO to begin with. We were relatively small, and we were a PMO that was also facilitating a lot of agile communities of practice. We had been doing that for 8 or 9 years. And so we transformed relatively easily to a lightweight group because we were relatively lightweight to begin with, but our mindset had to shift, right? And so rather than kind of rolling out the processes and controls and tools and templates and what have you, and telling people how to do their projects, we became an enablement function, right? And so we had to enable change. We had to kind of empower teams to really do what's best for them and to kind of enable the transformation. And so that's a very different mission than what a PMO traditionally is really set up to do.
Exactly. We have a question. Were the PMO members managing projects or PMO? Actually, Hisham, you can answer that one probably better.
Yeah, a little bit of both. A little bit of both. We had PMO members that were, included some of your more senior PMs that would manage projects, and then we had folks that were just kind of setting the foundation for what the PMO should do, the governance, making sure the portfolio is healthy, all that good kind of portfolio reporting.
Yeah, and there's a follow-on also about products as well. So what I would suggest is at that point in time, the concept of product was not necessarily very well defined. Often, a lot of organizations that are going through a transformation, they view the product as being a particular platform or a piece of software that they're working on, and they hadn't really made that shift to a product being more the service being provided to their customers. And that shift is really starting to happening. It's really doing much better now. So yeah, PMO was kind of helping with that, but I would suggest that the concept of product was really not extremely well defined at the beginning anyway. Excuse me. Right. Another question: did you face resistance from dinosaurs? Yeah. Wow, did we? Yes, and we're going to be talking more about that one in a little bit. Lots and lots of resistance all over the place, and we'll talk about some of the things that we did to get over most of it. Maybe not all of it yet, but we're still working through that. Interestingly, I'm doing some work right now with the Air Force. They call them graybeards, which I had never heard that term before. I think I'm a graybeard myself, but I thought that was a classic way of describing it. All right, let's jump back. So the next thing that we did was road mapping. Now, what was really interesting about this process was that we actually had very senior level business executives in a room together with Post-it notes and stickies and paper plastered all over the walls. So it wasn't an Excel spreadsheet kind of exercise. It was a group of people collaborating in a room with senior people writing things on Post-it notes and walking around, shoving them up on a wall. It was a very collaborative session. We ran, what were they, Hisham? About 4 hours, 2 to 4 hour each, something like that?
4 hour sessions for 4 different focus areas. To Roy's point, extremely senior people that, again, in a traditional private equity firm would never have ever done what they were doing in that room.
Yep. If there wasn't an Excel spreadsheet, they probably wouldn't have really participated. But to their credit, they were all in, and I think they really enjoyed the session. We did some things too, like we put on the door, we put a kind of an exit page so that as people were leaving, they could leave their feedback on the walls, just kind of anonymously. And we got some great feedback. We heard from some of these very senior people that it was some of the most effective and interesting sessions that they had ever been on at Carlyle in the history of their organization. Now, this was not saying that we did anything really cool or interesting or exciting, just they had never done this before. Very highly collaborative, without technology, just sitting up there writing Post-it notes. So as a result of that, we got this really collaborative discussion going about what work they should work on and often what work they shouldn't. And that's the stuff that we really wanted to get after is, how it is at most organizations, there's usually a whole bunch of projects that we probably should not be working on, right? Most organizations tend to focus on keeping people busy rather than keeping them busy on the right stuff. And we really wanted to shift that focus away and whenever possible, try to get rid of stuff that wasn't necessary. Now, in full openness, some of the work that we did in this road mapping was quite honestly to justify existing projects. There was a little bit of a feeling of that, which is very, very normal and very expected in your initial road mapping sessions. But the level of interactivity also got us some wins where people were more engaged and they wanted to see more of it, which was fantastic. So the next thing that we did was to take on jumpstarting the teams. Now, this was where we refocused our teams, restaffed some of our teams, meaning making sure that we spent some time intentionally building the right teams. As best we could, obviously, we expected that there were going to be some changes over time. And this jumpstart was to reset those teams, get them back on track again with what Agile is all about, make sure that they understood how we were going to work forward, do some story mapping sessions, help them understand the roadmaps and feed back into those roadmaps, and to engage the coaching activities. So each team had coaches involved with them provided by the COE. We did not have a lot of coaches. It's really just, 4 of us in the Agile COE. So it's a very small group of people. And but each team, we made sure that they all had the opportunity to receive coaching, not just at the start, but throughout the entire process. And there's a question: to design the new Agile operating model during the road mapping sessions. It was kind of a simultaneous thing. So we already had an idea of what the Agile process or the model was going to look like. And the road mapping was really defining the work that was going to fit within that model. So it's a little bit of kind of a parallel kind of process, but a lot of it happened, quite honestly, a little bit before the road mapping activities did.
Yeah, and just to kind of piggyback off of that. So yep. I will say the Agile operating model, we did design that prior to the road mapping sessions. Yeah. But again, what you design conceptually and then what you kind of put in place, put in practice, quickly kind of change and evolves. And so a lot of the things that we thought were going to work or were going to be effective worked, and some didn't, right? And so we're also very big on just iterating and kind of changing, kind of challenging what works and what doesn't work for the operating model and kind of within the governance structure that we've kind of laid out. Yep,
we went into it with eyes wide open that we fully expected that the model that we put together up front was going to have to change. So there was expectation that we were going to have to evolve it. Now, not everyone in the organization really quite understood that at first, which is very normal. But over time, they started getting the idea that things are going to change throughout. Still some complaints that happen from the organization that we're always changing things. So that's, we're still trying to get past some of those challenges. But overall, people are really adapting well to the concept that this is what we're going to try doing, and we may experience after we start exercising it that we might have to make some modifications. And there's just real quick, there's a question in the chat: how much time did it take to deploy the new operating model? We're still deploying it. We're going to continue deploying it over and over and over again. It's a constant thing. Hisham, do you have any answers for that one? What are your thoughts?
I mean, the initial deployments, right, took place this past year. We've gone through all the business-facing teams. We're actually now working our way to some of the IT-centric teams like infrastructure, security, and operations. But I feel like the new model's been deployed. But to Roy's point, yeah, we're constantly iterating on this model, right? And we expect to continuously kind of improve and iterate against it in the coming years.
Exactly. All right, Hisham, planning cadence?
Yeah, so, it says here quarterly roadmap refresh sessions, right? Which again, this is one of those things that in theory kind of sounds great. But I think what we realize is that we encouraged teams to update their roadmaps on an ongoing basis, right? So meaning things are going to change, right? The industry and I mean, we know all too well with the pandemic, right? Things are not going to wait for a quarter. So when things change, we need to kind of react. And so as things kind of shifted and the priorities changed for the firm, the roadmaps needed to get updated. So it's really all ongoing kind of updates to your roadmap. And again, we don't worry about project funding because we're not asking for funding, right? All we're doing is kind of reallocating capacity, potentially kind of deprioritizing other work based on kind of the new priorities. And so that really becomes a new discussion now is, okay, let's reprioritize, let's reallocate our capacity versus, hey, let's go fund this new project and spin up a new team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just very quickly, so I apologize, I missed a question in the chat window. So then did you have to change the scaling model a lot? And honestly, no. And the reason is that we have a very thin scaling model. We didn't go with some of the more traditional models like SAFe or things like that. We avoided those. And instead, what we wanted to do is have a collection of teams with a very thin layer of program on top of that and a very thin level of portfolio. So there's really not a lot of model changes that we had to go through as part of our scaling. Just as long as you've got good, solid teams that are producing product, then the rest of it's a lot easier, right?
Yeah, I could take the next question. Road mapping
Sure.
sessions, did they cover defining products? The products, again, in Carlyle lingo, kind of equate to these business lines or kind of focus areas, right? And so again, we're not necessarily kind of selling widgets or what have you. So we have lines of business that we needed to kind of align our teams and our investment towards or around, right? And so that was defined. Those focus areas or product were defined prior to the road mapping sessions. What we did do in the road mapping sessions, though, was identify the goals that those product lines or focus areas needed to kind of get after, right? So what are the goals and how do we kind of measure our goals to make sure that we're actually succeeding? So that was a completely interactive exercise as well, to define, one, the focus area goals, and then two, to kind of define what the work is that we want to get after in 2020.
Yep. All right, let's jump into our next stage, which was some failure. We had some really interesting times happening. So we did a lot of great work, got some momentum, but there were some things that were missed. And of course, usually as a transformation, you get to a point where some backsliding starts to happen again. So we had some situations where some of our senior leaders may not have been involved properly. I might have gotten some pushback. One of the biggest things that we got was meetings turning into status meetings again, and quiet meetings. Right. So we needed to refresh those and re-engage and make sure that people were engaging properly, collaborating, and make sure that our leadership was fully bought in. And that was a critical aspect, because if we had leadership that were backsliding, then that was going to destroy the entire process. So we needed to get past that. And Hisham, anything you want to add to that?
I mean, that was critical to the transformation. I told Roy this and the people on my team, right? This is make or break. If we don't do this right, the senior leadership piece, meaning if we had a critical stakeholder who was not engaged in designing or didn't have a role in the operating model. It wasn't our fault necessarily, because we weren't necessarily, there was also kind of a third-party consulting firm who was designing some of this stuff. And again, the politics, for whatever reason, he was not included. But we recognized immediately that we needed to kind of fix that. He is a critical stakeholder, very influential. We needed him to be involved because, one, we needed his support, and we needed his thoughts, his feedback on this model, and we needed him to be bought in. And so that we spent a lot of time, and we still do, really kind of talking to him and thinking about how we can kind of further improve this model. He's brought nothing but kind of tremendous ideas to the table. And, that was one thing that could have certainly blown up the transformation had we not made sure that he was involved.
Absolutely. So there's another question in the chat, which is a good question. I like this one. So how do we fix quiet meetings? So we still are, right? Because sometimes we backslide and we still have bad meetings. It happens. We try to do our best that when we recognize that there's a meeting that's not effective, that's not working for us, we retrospect and try to fix those meetings. We are making a conscious effort to try to, as best possible, eliminate PowerPoint, eliminate Excel in all of our meetings, and turn them into more workshops. So some of our meetings, like we had some quarterly planning sessions that didn't go so great. They turned into statusy kind of meetings, and there's not a lot of interactivity, things like that. And we're aggressively trying to change those meetings so that they become workshops and collaborative sessions. One of the challenges that we need to face is as a cultural challenge in the organization is the ability to challenge each other in these meetings. Most organizations have the same problem. We tend to be a little bit too politically correct and not challenge each other. We tend to think of rolling out Agile at the team level, and that's obviously very important. But as we roll up, you have different kinds of challenges. So we get into our leadership space, we get into our management space, program and portfolio activities. We need to encourage challenging each other at those levels as well. It's easy to encourage challenging and building great teams at the team level. It's harder to do it at the higher levels, right? Because you're dealing with different types of people and people with more authority and more responsibility and power. So that's something that we're definitely working on. We're still improving our meetings. We still have bad meetings occasionally. But we're trying to do our best to always recognize when something fails, go off and go do something about it, right? So Teresa, I don't know if I answered that fully, but that's kind of an approach that we're taking with these. All right. So Hisham already talked about enlisting leadership. So let's move on and talk about measuring teams. So this is a stage that we're kind of at right now. And it's not that we haven't been measuring teams, but now we're at a point where we're doing something about it. So we're collecting data. We're collecting some simple things like, the basics like velocity, and doing our best not to abuse those metrics, because it's very, very easy to do that. We want to collect things like about, making sure the teams are building high quality, make sure that they're working on the right things. Some of the data that we want to track is how much time is spent on operational support activities versus building new product, those kinds of things, and use that data to help us do better planning. So we're starting to make use of that data. We're building out dashboards so that now we can get better, effective use of that data to help build better decisions. Hisham, anything else you want to add?
Just this morning, I was actually meeting with our CIO, and we were looking at some of the metrics for the first time about, what is the kind of mix of work that we've been doing since we started this transformation. And you can kind of see the shift of the portfolio to kind of more value-oriented work that is aligned to kind of the firm priorities. And that's huge. And so we're at kind of the 80% mark, which is in line with kind of the industry benchmark, which is really huge. So a lot of metrics that we've gathered, and now we're able to kind of gauge kind of velocity and kind of what that looks like, not only for teams, but across the portfolio, and what value is being delivered, which I think is the most important thing that our leadership cares for.
Yep. And we've taken a very cautious approach to the metrics because they can get abused so quickly and used for the wrong thing. So we want to make sure that we're keeping it light as possible on the teams while still getting the information that we need. And we have a question in the chat window: why do we have bad meetings? There are always bad meetings. People don't participate properly. They may not be formatted properly. Lots of reasons. People may come with the wrong expectation, or an agenda was not set up properly. So there's always opportunities to improve our meetings. We want to get better and better at that, because we can waste huge amounts of time in our meetings. And not only can we waste time, we can also cause a very bad effect. By having one bad meeting, you can derail a process. So we want to make sure that we're always getting value out of the meetings. Expect bad meetings are going to happen, right?
Yeah, and we're also challenging status quo. For the longest time, our meetings were your typical meetings, right? You would go into a meeting, you'd have a PowerPoint deck, you'd have a readout, and everybody would nod their head. Maybe someone would say something, and we would all walk out, right? After putting together a 50 or 60 page kind of PowerPoint deck. We're now challenging kind of status quo, right? We're moving away from that and saying, okay, no more PowerPoint. We're just going to bubble up kind of key discussion items, and we're gonna force some uncomfortable discussion. And so that's how we plan on getting better. That we can have kind of cross-functional discussions and conversations about some of the meatier, kind of more strategic topics.
Mm-hmm. Another interesting question about if you have less metrics to measure, wouldn't performance management HR complain? So the metrics that we're tracking are not for individual personal performance planning, things like that. We expect those activities to happen as a result of individuals talking with their managers and having the relationship and the one-to-one sessions, and less about the individual, measuring the individual. We do that other ways. We want to be very careful that we don't use those measurements for the wrong reason. And if we're using, as an example, if you use velocity to measure the performance of a team, you're going to have some very, very bad things happen. Right? It's just a terrible, terrible idea. What will wind up happening is the teams are going to game those numbers, and they're going to look great and produce less. So we want to be very, very careful how those metrics are. And yes, they can be weaponized very quickly. So we separate the metrics from performance and HR. The metrics are used for improvement only, and we expect individual performance to be done on the relationship between management and the individuals. All right, Hisham, did you want to take the improvements?
Yeah, I mean, standing up communities of practice has been critical for us. It's like I mentioned earlier, we had stood up the Agile community of practice for a while now, but we're extending that model across the board. whether that's a Scrum Master community, we're trying to break it out. So we have a Scrum Master community, we have a broader kind of product owner community practice. We now have more kind of technical related communities of practice that sit within another COE. But then now we're also spinning up a DevOps one, and we have a quality COP. That's really how we want people to kind of get better and share kind of what's working, what's not working. And that just drives a little bit more of kind of the grassroots kind of movement, and make sure that, one, we're driving adoption, and then two, the ideas about how we get better are coming from the practitioners that are actually living and breathing this stuff.
Yep, absolutely. So the place we're at right now, and we're going to talk more about this just a little bit, is we're about ready to embark on the annual budgeting process. We've shifted away from project focus. We no longer have projects at Carlyle, which was a major change for the organization. People still view things sometimes as projects, and we're still working toward eliminating that concept. Instead of doing projects, we have a continuous stream of stuff that we're building. Our budgeting process has changed so that instead of funding projects, we instead have an annual budget that's set based on the capacity of the organization. Those dollars are set. And we then go from within those dollars, those fixed dollars, we think about what work can we get done for that budget. We're going to talk more about this in just a minute. So a lot has changed, and the way that we allocate dollars has changed. The way that we get money has changed. Instead of project by project, instead we simply just, here's the dollars for the year, and work within those dollars. Now, doing that has changed the mindset to be focused more on prioritization, what we need to do versus what we are being requested to do. And it's a dramatic change in the organization just by doing that. Not an easy shift. That's a very hard shift, and we're still working toward it. We're about ready to go through the annual budgeting process. I mentioned we've been spending, Hisham, the past 2 months prepping for our annual budget process, the Agile COE, not the entire organization, just to make sure that we're doing it properly, because it is a critical, very key aspect of the next stages of the Agile transformation. And just very quickly, we have 2 questions. Do you ask COP members, SMEs to obtain Agile certifications? Hisham, did you want to take that one?
Not formally right now. However, we are coming up with different kind of career paths and kind of competency skills that we're going to be looking for across kind of the Agile community. So for Scrum Masters or product owners, et cetera, et cetera. So we are coming up with kind of what that path will look like, but not right now.
Yeah. And I would suggest very quickly, the certifications are useful for career development. They're very valuable, but having a certification doesn't mean that you know what you're doing. So we want to make sure that people are experienced and trained properly, and not just if they have a certification that automatically makes them a good person to be on your team. So, and that's not to put certifications down. Of course, they're valuable, but it's more important that we have the right person with the right skills and the experience, rather than the certification that goes with it. A couple more quick questions. Were there individuals who totally refused to change, and what did you do with them? I don't know if it was directly totally refused to change. We certainly have resistance. Hisham, any thoughts about that?
We haven't had, pretty close.
It's been close.
Pretty close, but no. And the reason we haven't gotten any people that have totally refused is because we have pretty good senior leadership buy-in now, and we've got that top-down support, and that helps, right? And listen, if you asked me 2 or 3 months ago if we had that, I would say probably not. But I think one of the things that we have made a lot of strides in has been the top-down leadership support. We had that in pockets, but again, Roy and I have spent a lot of time with leadership over the last 3 to 6 months, and just making them kind of part of this change and getting them involved, and that's provided a lot of air cover. And so when people are not going to refuse the change if the change is also being mandated from the top. So
yeah,
we have had people that kind of push back and kind of challenge, and that's healthy, and that's good, but totally refused, not yet.
When your C-suite is saying we're going this direction, it makes that resistance a lot harder. So we have that C-suite saying this is the way we're going. One other quick question, then we'll get back to the slides. So when the Agile transformation began and is continuing, did you go department to department or big bang? We went big bang. So we said everybody in the pool, everyone on the bus, we're going this direction. Reorganized the entire organization. Got everybody. We did communications, made sure that everybody knew what was coming, and everybody got in the pool together. So it was an entire organization transformation.
All in.
Yep. We're good. I know there's a couple other questions, but we also want to make sure that we're getting through a couple of other topics here. We will answer your questions, though. Want to make sure we're good on timing. All right, so just very quickly, some key changes that have occurred. First, we started with our goals, and that was the first time that we did this at the organization. We had the organizational goals, the focus area goals, start with the goals so we knew our destination before we started down the journey, and that's a really important aspect. We shifted away from projects, so there are no more projects in the organization. We're focusing instead on value. What's the most important thing to work on? Now, in full transparency, not 100% buy-in here yet. We still have some resistance going on, but it's a lot better. And people occasionally still have that project mindset, but we're starting to get rid of a lot of that. So it's getting better. Another key aspect: stable, cross-functional, self-organizing teams. The teams were built as product teams. Still a little bit of platform concept that still exists in the organization, but it's certainly better than it was. We've built these teams intentionally with the right skills. As we were going through the Jumpstart process, we recognized this was actually really valuable. There were times where we recognized that teams were just being built to keep a platform together. They weren't being used at their proper capacity. So we took those teams where we recognized that they were not being used properly and shifted them away from the platform and into more, here is a cross-functional team that can take functionality and also maintain the platform as part of their work. What was happening in some cases was that teams existed and they were finding work for them to do. And that's not what we want. We want to make sure that we're always working on the right stuff, not just keeping people busy. It's not about keeping people busy. It's about delivering value. So that was a little bit of a shift as well. As we mentioned, we also now budget by team or by capacity. We have a fixed budget for the year, and we don't go for additional dollars. There's a little bit of lenience there, of course, when things come up, but we don't budget by projects anymore. We don't go for dollars. People don't have to sing for their suppers anymore. They simply say, here's the budget for the year. Now, what work are we going to get done within that period of time? And we fully expect that the work that they do within the year is going to change dramatically as the organization changes and conditions change. Look what happened this year. Some of the work that would have gone on if it was project focused has been removed because of the dramatic changes that we've had to do. Another focus, which is getting better, which is focusing on what not to work on. We really want to take a very hard look and be ruthlessly aggressive about getting rid of the stuff that's not important. We really want to focus on the value and far less on just keeping people busy. The other key changes involving leadership, and this took a lot of time and a lot of hand-holding, a lot of conversations to make sure that we had the proper leadership buy-in and involvement. We're at a great place now, and like Hisham said a couple of months ago, not so great. And at this point, I think we're in a much, much better position. We have senior leadership buy-in, C-suite saying, yes, this is the direction that we're going. All right, just very quickly on how to make the NoProjects concept work. So this is something that we took to heart. We really jumped on this. And the concept here is, first, you build your stable teams. Now, if you have stable teams, then you should know what your cost is. You do a blended all-in rate for your teams. You've got fixed teams, and they are there for the duration of the year. If you're able to keep those stable teams, then your costs become fixed as well. And that switches the process around, or thought process around, to instead of worrying about, hiring more people and, allocating dollars toward work, instead we focus on, here are the teams that we have. What work do we want to get done within the time box, within the year period of time? Now, we also, again, focus on capacity rather than on a budget on capacity rather than budgeting on work. So we got rid of the project discussions and instead focus on what is the right thing for us to work on. We expect in our budgeting process, the budget pays for people rather than paying for work. The cost of work is derived from the cost of the teams. Another key aspect to focus on is it's about what to not work on. Again, don't focus on keeping people busy. Resource allocation is actually bad stuff. We don't want to focus on just keeping resources busy. We want to keep them focused on building the right stuff, which means focusing again on prioritization. Now we're in, as I mentioned, we're in the annual budgeting process, which is critical to the overall transformation. The way that we're viewing the agile budgeting process is simply, maybe a little more complex than this, I'm oversimplifying it, that the annual budget process should be a delta. Are we comfortable with the output that we got last year? And if we are, then your budget for this year, this coming year, should be fairly similar. If we feel that we need additional output, more work being done, then maybe we should allocate some extra dollars to hire additional teams. If we have other challenges where we maybe need to have less budget for various reasons, right? Then that might be focusing on reducing our capacity, which means reducing our dollars as well, right? And that's the basic concept. I want to get into a couple of, or actually before I do that, Hisham, is there anything that you wanted to add to this?
No.
Nope. Okay. All right, cool. Just a couple of questions real quick. With the focus on value, how do you prevent established products from crowding out new or expensive value streams? Awesome discussion. So we've allocated capacity for specific things. Like we need to keep the lights on. We need to focus on minor enhancements. We need to focus on strategic work as well. So it's not just prioritization discussion, it's also a percentage allocation discussion. So allocate capacity. I would prefer it to be a pure prioritization discussion, but it doesn't quite work well that way. If it's purely a priority discussion, then that really new cool stuff is going to be the focus. And we also need to recognize that keeping the lights on and the existing work products running, that's a critical aspect, and we can't forget that stuff. Also focusing on technical debt and allocating some capacity for those discussions as well. Hisham, did you want to take any of the questions?
With the shift from project funding to capacity funding, or product work, project tracking for spend health, we have actually not, no. We have not been tracking kind of spend by product. It's again, we're funding the teams. It's a fixed budget, so there's nothing really to track. We don't want to track budget at kind of the smaller increments of work, because that's just going to lead to that's going to get you back to kind of where you were with mini projects, and we don't want to do that. So we've kind of gone away from even talking about budget, which has actually been outstanding from my standpoint, because I didn't think we were going to be able to do that. But we've moved away from that, and really the conversation has really been about, are we working on the right stuff? Are we working on too many things? Can we get things kind of to the finish line? Can we work on less and get things to the finish line? And talking about kind of the next quarter and the next priorities and the risks that are coming up, right? So that's really been more of the business kind of outcome discussion, less around kind of the business output, which is your traditional kind of budget, scope, and schedule.
Yep, exactly. So I wanted to get to a comment, last question at the end there, as well as made some comments about, PowerPoint and Excel, trying to get rid of them. Now, it's not to imply that PowerPoint and Excel are bad tools. They're actually very useful tools. And I agree with your comment. They were being used very poorly. The challenge with bringing PowerPoint to a meeting is that often they become the focus of the conversation. One person presenting something, or one person, typing in an Excel spreadsheet. So it's not an effective way to run those meetings. It's not a problem with the tool, right? It's how those tools are used, and how meetings tend to change when they become the focus of those meetings. So yes, of course, we're still going to use Excel. We're still going to use PowerPoint, but we want to focus more on working sessions rather than readouts and those kinds of sessions. So hopefully that makes more sense. Again, not to say that they're bad tools. That's never the intent. Okay. All right. Almost through our slides. Just a couple more quick ones. And then we're going to get, we'll make sure all the questions are answered. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the retrospective. So Hisham, did you want to take point on this?
Yeah. So what worked? What worked is, again, we created these stable teams. So we reduced dependencies on other teams. We had all kinds of different dependencies happening in the old model. So we're able to kind of significantly reduce dependencies, reduce escalations as well, because again, you don't have to vie for the funding, right? You're not vying for the funding. You don't need to kind of sell the project or what have you, right? So you're just kind of working together, kind of come up with the right kind of set of priorities. Business involvement has been awesome. Transparency has been great. Working on more of the right stuff has probably been the huge piece here. Out of everything is, again, we're finally actually working on the right stuff, the stuff that's actually moving the needle for the firm, and actually the stuff that's actually aligned to the firm priorities. And so more so than anything else, I think that's the biggest kind of what worked really well is working on the right stuff.
All right, some challenges on this one. Some things that may not have gone so great. So most organizations have this cultural challenge in that we tend to avoid conflict, right? People generally don't like conflict, and conflict, when it's healthy and facilitated properly, conflict can be fantastic. It's that whole divergence concept. So if we have disagreements, we want to be able to bring those to the surface and make sure we discuss them. In the earlier times, we had some difficulties of people letting go of budgets. We seem to be mostly over that now. So people are talking far less about money and ways of getting money. And instead now we're talking more about prioritization. And we had some people that were really had a hard time letting go of that concept about, well, I just need more capacity. We still occasionally have that. And we're really changing that conversation. It's not about getting more capacity. It's about deprioritizing stuff that's wrong, working within your capacity. We also had a bit of a challenge where some of our Scrum Masters were somewhat inexperienced. We're still working through that and trying to get them more experience and get them more comfortable with the jobs. Another challenge, we're getting better at this one, and that was the discomfort with fuzzy numbers. There's a view that if you can track every hour that someone is working on, that is accurate and realistic. And now if you can track every hour, you can track every dollar. The reality is that's just not true. Just because someone says they worked on an hour for something doesn't necessarily mean that's actually what happened. We all know how that works. So those numbers are inherently fuzzy. What we have moved more toward is working more with estimates and story points and those kinds of concepts for budgeting purposes. We're getting better at that, so not 100%. Working more in that direction rather than trying to track hours worked, because it's just as fuzzy. There's also a bit of a resistance to being measured. And it's not necessarily the teams, although there is some resistance for the teams for being measured. There's also resistance from our business units of being measured. They've never had to be measured in the past. So we have a lot more focus on ROI. And ROI does not necessarily mean dollars. It means that we're going the right direction, that sort of thing. And that can be a bit of a challenge. We are starting to get past those challenges as well. Hisham, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, and I'm going to go relatively quick on some of these because I know we're trying to hit 7:15. So change is hard. The team and I, we talk about that every single day. Don't take things personally, right? You're going to have good days, you're going to have bad days. People are going to push back. People are going to resist. Some days you're going to think this is not going to work at all. And then some other days you think this is the best thing. So just take it all in stride. Don't get too high. Don't get too low. Make sure you involve the right leadership up front. Get them engaged. People are going to look to you, even though we're the COE, we're not the PMO. It's okay to be prescriptive. They're gonna need some guidance and hand holding, especially in the beginning, and that's okay. Over time, you move away from that, but for the short term, that's completely fine. Yep. Some teams, you just need to walk away sometimes. If they don't want to be coached or don't need to be coached, some teams need to fail to kind of figure it out. So let them fail. Again, not maliciously. You're doing it so that they can kind of come around in a productive manner.
Yep, exactly. It's going to happen, and sometimes the best way for them to learn is to have some minor failures, controlled failures, of course. So some things that we would do differently, we would involve our leadership a lot sooner. So we've called out in a few cases involving our CFO, and I wanted to point out why that is. When you're going through a transformation, it's not just about doing the work, rolling up teams. It's not just about IT. The way that you do finance is different. The way that you track dollars is different. The way the budget is managed is different. So the dollars have a dramatic impact on the transformation itself. So we want to make sure that your CFO is involved in those discussions and make sure that they understand what it's going to mean to their world, because it does change how the CFO world and how the accounting and finance operations happen, right, the way that they work. So another thing that we would likely do is we would have preferred to bring our Scrum Masters under the COE. And the reason is that if a Scrum Master, if they're working for a manager who is also controlling work, there can be some conflict of interest. If they are under the COE, they can be primarily focused on the process and the team rather than on what their manager may be guiding them for. And this is not an intentional thing that managers are trying to do bad stuff, simply that it's human nature to try to have some self-interest. And this is not trying to call anyone out in any way. It's just the way, it's just human behavior. So if the Scrum Masters can be brought out from the management chain and brought into the COE, that we can encourage some better behaviors. Hisham, does anyone add anything to that?
No.
Okay, all right. I know we're running out of time. All right, so let's talk about very quickly some next steps. We are definitely not done yet. So the first thing that we want to do is get out of the way. And we're starting to get really good at this. We're getting out of their way and encouraging the teams to make their own decisions and encouraging leadership to make their own decisions. So now the COE is starting to become more of a facilitator and less prescriptive and more facilitation. So we've backed away, not producing a lot of templates, not telling people what to do, and instead helping others to determine how the right way to do it. I'll take the next one, Hisham. Quality and DevOps. So this is where we are right now. We're going through this process. We are shifting away from a centralized QA model. In fact, that's already gone. We do not have a centralized QA model. And we are now focusing on quality as being a mindset, a behavior. It's a culture. So quality is throughout the organization. It's in every team member and not a specific role. We're not 100% there yet. Strides here. DevOps, we're still fairly immature, and we have a lot of work to do there as well. Hisham, want to take the next?
Sure. So yeah, we'll break the contractor. So we're trying to move away from contractors. We want to reduce our dependencies, obviously bring in more employees. That builds up your domain knowledge that you can retain over time. We're starting now to kind of further extend the Agile model way beyond IT. So we actually just had our first pilot, I guess you can call it, over the last couple of weeks with digital marketing, where they basically just embraced the whole Agile model and the way of working, and they've adopted it, and we're helping just coach and just guide them. But it's great. It's been fantastic. And we have other kind of pockets within the firm that are looking to kind of adopt this new model in across different business segments. So it's been really good. Make work smaller and leaner. We talked about this. We want to start working on less. We want to start. We now are working on 3 months worth of work. Eventually, we want to get to less than that. Talked about the PowerPoint. Talked about the meetings, and lastly is just, again, it's continuous improvement, right? So within the construct, we want to keep on getting better within our operating model. We know that certain things are going to change. Some things are going to work, some things are not. And so we're always kind of self-reflecting every day and challenging ourselves to kind of be better and kind of look at kind of what's working, what's not. So it's a journey.
Exactly. All right, our last slide. So just some key takeaways that you should think about. And again, I want you to really understand that the transformation that Carlyle has gone through is going to be different from what you're doing. It's everyone should view their own journey, their own transformation, maybe take some ideas away from this and see some of the mistakes that we've made and some of the successes that we've had. Use what makes sense for you. The key here is that Agile is not your goal. It's not about doing Agile. It's about making change better, making your organization better, improving, continuous improvement. It's more of a Kaizen approach instead of just doing Agile. Agile can help us get there. The practices help us. It helps us recognize challenges in our organization. But you really need to focus not just on the practices, but more on the cultural aspects, the behaviors, the values and principles. And that's where you're really going to get your significant results. So we're at the end of our presentation. And whoops, I don't know what happened there. Let me get to my last slide. Okay, so what I'm going to do here, this is, so back to our poll. You do not have to answer anything immediately. We're happy to take questions and you know, whatever else you'd like to do, Fadi. So this is, sorry, 1 second. This is just our response wall. Oops, where is it? There we go. Let us know what you think about our presentation. And there we go. Okay, the poll should now be coming up. So as you're asking questions, and Fadi, as we go through our last steps, if you could leave some words for us of wisdom, that would be helpful. Let us know what you think, and you know, what you could potentially be doing differently. Fadi, back to you.
Fantastic. We'll take a few more questions, and then we'll have our drawing to do the book giveaway. So let's spend another maybe 5 or so minutes trying and answering it if there are any more questions.
Fantastic. So let's go to a couple of questions in the chatting window. What are you reading, or how are you learning more about Agile operating models? Oh, good question. Personally, I constantly am reading and rereading books that I've watched in the past. So
I think we lost Roy.
Did we lose him?
Oh, oops, something just happened.
Yeah, Roy, you're going in and out.
That was weird. My whole screen just went blank.
You're frozen.
Okay. So hopefully everyone can still hear me. I just reread the Phoenix Project, another one of my books.
Yeah, you're going in and out, Roy.
Not sure what's.
Hisham,
can you hear me?
Jump in.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. So I think we're probably reading the same set of books, whether that's the Phoenix Project or you know, Project to Product, or what the book that we recommended today, Measure What Matters, right? And that's specific to kind of coming up with kind of more discrete, specific goals and making sure that we're measuring everything that we're working on. So Roy, I don't know if there's anything now that you're back. I don't know if there's other books.
Yeah. Sorry about that. My screen just went crazy on me. Yeah. So really the key here is just keep reading, keep learning. I attend as many webinars as I can. I've trying to learn from people that have been doing this, you know, longer than me, all that sort of thing. So just go for education, right? At whatever you can. A couple other quick questions. COE, Center of Excellence. We got that one answered. We have COEs and COPs. The COE is kind of the overall view of, you know, of what we're doing, and the COPs are more community-based, where they are factoring, you know, coming from the teams, what they are doing, right? And what practices they want to do. Some other questions.
Numbers. We can talk about numbers, number of teams, number of team members. Not teams. I don't know, 25, 30 teams maybe across, maybe less, around 25, 30. Number of team members, yeah, you know, some are larger, some small. We try to get to that 9 to 11 kind of sweet spot, but some of our teams are larger intentionally for now, just because we had big teams, and so we make it work. Number of product owners equate to kind of the number of teams. We try to keep one product owner to one team. Number of leaders we have for each of, we have around 5 focus areas, which are kind of 5 product lines. For each of those areas, we have 2 leadership roles. We have an exec sponsorship role, which is typically is either a partner within Carlyle, so pretty senior. And then we have domain leads that are more specific to kind of sub areas or sub focus areas within those areas. So think of like a domain lead, someone like a HCM domain lead or a legal domain lead within kind of a broader corporate services focus area.
Yep. So we have a good question here. What impact has the budget based on teams done to build versus buy decisions? And how do you risk getting stuck on products that are significantly behind the curve? So we have these conversations all the time. Carlyle does not build everything itself. There's a number of off-the-shelf products that get used. So in fact, we're actually going through a couple of conversations right now about some of the products. So they're keeping an understanding that there are differences between the team budgets and asset purchases. They are two separate things. And we make conscious decisions all the time about, is this the right product? Is it the right technology? And there are always, of course, there's opportunities where we get stuck on a product because it's what we have internally, just like every other organization. But we have those discussions and we make conscious decisions about, is this the right platform or should we go for something else? I don't know if that answered your question sufficiently, but that's some of the conversations we have. Any other questions?
Yeah, we have just the last two. I'll hit them very quickly here. Annual performance reviews. They haven't necessarily changed. They are shifting because we are kind of doing a broader transformation. So if anything, they've become a bit more iterative versus kind of the big bang annual review. And I think we're going to be moving towards that next year. Techniques for gauging team productivity and keeping them from gaming their velocity. Not comparing them to each other, right? So we keep them delineated. Team, just measure your velocity, right? It's for the team and only the team. We don't bubble it up in kind of any kind of broader kind of executive meetings or what have you, because we don't want them to get into the gaming business.
Yep.
What metrics do we use? We use the whole gamut, right? So the big one is the mix of work. We're working on the right stuff. So value stream work related to kind of break fix work. Velocity, obviously, volatility is something that we kind of are looking at as well. So there are a number of metrics, quality metrics, obviously, effects and this, that, and the other. So we look at a number of metrics. And again, those are more team, but then also from a business outcome standpoint, we're encouraging metrics like net promoter score and other kind of metrics that kind of help gauge kind of how we're doing from a business standpoint and how are we kind of achieving our value.
Just something very, very quickly, something that was introduced, which was interesting as well, was as we're producing product faster, producing value faster, it also has a side effect in that things are getting into production faster. Therefore, there's more operational support that may be necessary, especially if they're taking shortcuts, trying to get to dates. So seeing that data of operational support versus new product activities going on is a really good judge of a lot of things. You know, are we following good standards? Are we staffed correctly? Are we producing quality, a product that's maybe not the best quality at times? Are we taking shortcuts? And we have some of those challenges, of course. But this data is really useful to help us pinpoint those areas and then help to right staff and make sure that people are taking care of their technical debt.
Yeah, there's the one last one around success of transformation. Again, it's ongoing, right? We're always measuring ourselves. I think it's value. Are we delivering value? Are we getting teams to kind of deliver value? Are we moving a needle for Carlyle overall? I think that's how we measure our transformation at the end of the day. It's obviously value sooner, and I think that's kind of the barometer that we use.
One of the things I like to add to that is, are we having fun? That's an important thing. If you're having fun, you're doing something right. And we've had some really interesting changes. Yeah. Our CIO sang a song about Agile. You never would have expected that in a very private equity kind of firm, right? So it's becoming more fun and more engaging. So I think we're going in the right direction.
Yeah, that was a fun one. Yes.
Yep.
All right, awesome. So we are going to do our book giveaway, but before we do that, if you can all please go off mute so we can give Hisham and Roy a big hand of applause for an awesome talk and a great discussion, please. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
All right, awesome. I'm glad that you two were able to join us. This was very interesting and tons of questions came in. Great discussion. Thanks for sharing. I'm sure the journey is not going to be over, so we'd love to have you back maybe in a year or so you can give us an update on how things actually laid out versus what you thought was going to happen. That would be interesting.
100%.
All right. Let's see. Roy, I'm going to ask you to pick a number from 1 to 17.
12.
12. 12. Elizabeth, are you still with us? Elizabeth Ernley.
Yes, I am.
You are with us. All right. Congrats, Elizabeth.
Hey,
you won the
thank you.
book. I will be in touch with you, and you can pick whether you want a digital copy or a physical copy. So I'll reach out to you after that.
Perfect.
Great
Fantastic.
book. You'll
All right.
like it.
Congrats. All right,
I'm
everybody.
so excited.
September 9, we're having an open space. If you want to participate in that, please sign up. And then September 21, we're going to have George Dinwiddie join us to talk about estimation. Other than that, Roy and Hisham, thanks again for joining us, and hope to see everybody next time. Thank you.
Great.
Everyone, have a good night. Thank you, guys.